personal hero's journey of our experience. You know, heroes have this hero's journey. They end up dealing with certain philosophical or conceptual challenges in their lives. They have some inner challenges, inner demons they have to slay and get over, and then outer actions they have to take through bravery to make something happen. So we call this personality quest, and we really address those 3 areas each week on the program with you and a community of like minds in order to be present to ourselves and our personal growth. All right, that was the preamble.
That's the preamble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's doing good. Having a good Christmas, Jonathan?
I did. I had a good Christmas. We're celebrating New Year's today.
Fair enough.
It's not Christmas anymore, Joel.
Get over it.
We're still in the holiday spirit.
So, okay, this is a humbling moment. I don't know if anyone can relate to this, but holidays, especially Christmas, sneaks up on me badly.
Oh yeah.
Like, it will be, and I'm thinking maybe I don't have that introverted sensing process online, whatever it is. I skipped all kinds of things this year. I forgot to put up a tree. I forgot to put up decorations. I forgot to buy gifts for very important people in my life. And it was horribly humbling. So the day after Christmas was pretty awful. A lot of reconciliation with, I am failing at this aspect of my life. I have no concept of like why we do things over and over and over and over again. So as a actionable step that I took after deeply apologizing to my wife for not buying a present and skipping our anniversary, I programmed it into my phone for 2024. And believe it or not, I put a reminder to myself on December 1st, Jonathan, go buy a Christmas tree. And I thought, if I see a Christmas tree in my home, I'm more likely to put presents underneath it.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I have those extroverted sensing, just boom, in my face reminders.
Yeah.
Then I'm more likely to be like, oh yeah, I should, buy gifts or something like that. And even because otherwise I'm not going to remember it.
Yeah.
And I also figure out another way is if I create these little contracts with people and I say, hey, Joel and Antonia, I'm going to do this really awesome thing for Ellen on her anniversary and on our wedding anniversary. I start like developing almost buy-in from you, then I'm more likely to remember something, because then I'm going to have to go back to our next conversation and you're going to say, so how did that go? Ideally, you do, if you remember. And then I had that social shame of not having delivered. So it's like this horrible mental gymnastics to get me to buy gifts at Christmas time. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why it eludes me.
I'm not sure if we should be your introverted sensing accountability partners.
Don't use us as standards in your life.
I'm not sure if I'm good at occupying that role. I've also had a very humbling Christmas. Usually I'm well ahead of the game, right? Like I have Christmas shopping done and gifts wrapped just about like the second week of December, and I'm done, right? Everything's done. Not this year. This year I've been scrambling. I was up till 6 a.m. wrapping gifts on Christmas Eve because I was so behind the 8 ball. Yeah. And so that was humbling for me too. Because it's been a year. Right? It's been a year. It's been such a terrible, awful, horrific year for me that I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna cap it off with like not getting my stuff together for Christmas either. But I like to believe that this year is completing and it's closing a chapter, and next year, I don't know, I say this every year. Next year will be better, right?
Next year's a leap year. And so I was looking at the calendar, and this distance between American Thanksgiving and Christmas is, I think, a week shorter than normal.
Oh.
And so I bet next year people are going to have a lot of like stress.
Humbling, yeah.
Because it's going to come off the heels of a crazy like 2024 politically and socially, right? We just know that's coming for us.
Yeah.
It's coming. I want to get into the details of that. We just don't know. It doesn't matter how that goes down. That's going to be pure chaos. And then at the end of that, right after that all happens and that closes up, hopefully it closes up in November here in America, we're going to have a very short window on because Thanksgiving's so late, American Thanksgiving. Right. So it's going to put this like pressure cooker on people that are probably already stressed out from the entire year. So I imagine next year, there's gonna be a lot of like, people are going to need a lot of mental health days and like some chill, because it's going to be pretty intense.
So get your act together.
I don't know.
Early.
That's me suspecting. Well, I don't know if I'm right.
I put Christmas in my calendar.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm good.
You can count on it happening.
Handled.
December 25th, Jonathan. There you go. Now you know it's coming.
It's coming. I won't be surprised.
Plan.
Yeah.
You can totally plan.
We're also talking, Jonathan and I, before this started, we were talking about how humbling family gatherings are too, because we're at Joel's parents' place. And so we went to a Witt family get together yesterday where, I mean, there had to have been 40 or 50 people in that house.
Oh yeah.
Just a million people. And I was saying that I'm the person everybody knows not to talk to because I always go deep into subjects. So everybody just kind of walks around me.
It's the opposite at live events, right? Like everybody wants to talk to Antonia. Nobody wants to talk to Antonia.
So I just end up sitting in there.
She's
I just end up sitting there like smiling at everybody, and they smile at me too, but they walk way around. And so for hours and hours, I'll just sit there with like a beverage in my hand as a prop and just smile at people, and everybody like smiles pleasantly and walks around.
Oh my gosh.
Like, this is a good experience for me. I need to remember that there are rooms in which I walk into that literally nobody wants to talk to me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautifully humbling.
It's a good moment. Yeah, it's like, it's very grounding, you know. Like, this is also reality. This actually probably is more reality than all the other realities.
Yeah.
So it's good. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're just joining us, welcome to Personality Quest. Joel Mark Witt, Antonia Dodge here with Jonathan Harden. Christian Rivera is off this week with family for the holidays, but we're here talking with you if you're coming in on any of the live streams, watching live on the internet, or if you're here as an actual Quest Club member, welcome. Glad this is the last one for the year, because tonight we turn the clock ahead to the next year, or turn the date ahead or something. I think the Australians might even be in next year already. I don't know. If you're from the down under area, I think you're already at least very closely entering the new year. If you're not already there, you might be coming from the future. So that was fantastic. If you're
that's right.
Coming from next year, talking to us, that's incredible. But if you're here present with us still in this year, that's also good.
I mean, is it not enough that you have someone from every continent? Now you have to have someone from every time zone.
That's right.
And time space continuum.
That's right. That's exactly what I want.
And then everybody from every multiverse.
Okay.
That's one. That's right.
Goals.
Why doesn't anybody want to talk to you at a Witt family gathering, Antonia?
We're going to be rolling into a clip in just a moment.
Do you have to bring up the multiverse in every conversation?
Why don't people hang out with me?
Why don't people hang out with me?
Well, I'm doing the worst. I'm busy trying to do like psychotherapy on everyone. So
Right.
my voice gets really deep and sultry, and pretty soon people are undressing spiritually in front of me. It's like, whoa, time and place. Jonathan, stop.
I don't know what that means, but that sounds provocative.
Yeah, I like it.
It's a very provocative statement. Dressing spiritually in front of me.
Yeah. It's that one-to-one sexual instinct, I think it is. I don't know.
I think so too.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
In a few minutes, we're going to run into a clip that myself and Antonia recorded in one of our Personality Hacker podcasts, a short clip talking about a model that we use when we're helping work with people or even in our internal teams. We call it the visionary calibrator implementer model. We don't really have a good name for it yet. We'll have to work on that. Need a crunchy title for it. We're going to talk about this and talk a little about vision today. I think we go into vision. I forget what the exact clip is that we're going to focus on today, but this is something I'd like us to tune into as we enter the new year. A lot of people have plans or ideas of what they want to do going forward. A lot of ambition. I always have a hard time with this part of the year, right? It's like this idea of setting New Year's intentions. It kind of makes me mad because I know I'm not going to hold up to them, but I know this is a good time of year to check in and reflect. So I'm always like, it's that a little bit of introverted feeling. ENFP part of me is like, I'm not going to do New Year's intentions. That's what everybody's doing. So I'll not do it because that's the thing that everybody's doing. It's like my instinct. So then I try to do it like earlier or later. Like that's like my solution. Like if I do it 3 weeks earlier in December, that it's not what everybody else is doing. If I do it in the middle of January, but I still kind of do like New Year's resolutions. It's weird. I just have like this avoidance of it.
And I think you're not, unfortunately, I'm sorry that you're following a trend, but I think a lot of people are abandoning the concept of New Year's resolutions. And in fact, I think I've even over the last couple of years read some salty art about how bad they are or whatever. But I'm like, no, I think that making commitments with oneself is a good thing. I think one of the articles I read was like, and when you don't keep it, your self-esteem plummets. And I'm like, maybe it should, right? Like if you make a commitment with yourself and you don't keep it, then maybe you should take a little bit of a hit and reevaluate and go, why can't I trust myself when I'm making these resolutions?
This preservation of feelings at all costs.
Yeah.
All right, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. I think it's preservation of feelings and preservation of feeling uncomfortable and feeling like a failure. It's like the worst thing in the world is to feel like a failure or to, and I told my kids, my daughter, she was saying like, hey, I haven't gotten good at recorder. I haven't gotten good at my flute. I haven't gotten good at painting. And I just sat her down and said, I want you to understand you are good at anything you practice at.
Yep.
You put in the time, the energy, the attention, the effort, you are good at it. But there's this collective like imagination. Like if I haven't reached this goal in my head or envy of someone else who's doing something really good.
Yeah.
And then we protect ourselves by, okay, I'm just not going to make a commitment or a goal, or worse, I'm not going to make other people feel bad because I'm making a commitment. And I think that's a big piece of it too. I don't want to shame Antonia for me saying that I'm going to do something different about my life because she'll feel
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like I'm going to lose some weight. Well, what if I don't want to lose weight? You're making me feel bad that I don't want to lose weight. I'm like,
yeah,
I'm not you. I'm making my own commitments with myself.
right.
You make your commitments with yourself. So you do your thing and I'll do my thing over here. And
Yeah.
and I'm when I make a commitment like that, I do like to talk about it. Not necessarily to bring in anybody else in, like they have to be my accountability partner or anything. But when I hear myself say it out loud, probably because I have extroverted preferences, suddenly it's real. If it's just inside of myself, I'm like, I can fudge the numbers. But if I say it out loud and then I hear myself say it, I'm like, okay, now it's in the outside world. Now it's a real thing. Now I have to commit to it for realsies. And so I do tend to talk about those kinds of things. But one of the resolutions I've made, and I think I've got Joel on board, is in the podcast, we've kind of gone a little bit, well, I tend to be very self-indulgent with the podcast. I tend to like to talk about what's interesting to me. And there was a time span there where what was interesting to me was a little on the deeper side, a little bit like maybe less accessible. And so
it's great for super fans, people that really know what's going on. But for new people to get introduced or access our show, I was concerned, like, this is not going to have an access point for somebody that's uninitiated. That's brand new.
Most of this year, we've not talked about things that were necessarily interesting to me. We've talked about things that were, like maybe a little bit more accessible to a broader audience and that sort of thing. And we recently had a couple of people who are podcast listeners from way back say, actually, we're missing it. And so they're missing the deeper conversation is authentic and natural that comes from within. And I was like, I think that I'm missing it too. And in fact, I don't think that I'm going to be able to podcast for very long if we keep going on this what's not interesting to me necessarily mode. And so I'm like, I think we need to go back, even if it loses everybody, even if it loses our entire audience. Like, we've been doing this for 10 years and I don't think I'm going to be able to like hit another year if I can't talk about what's interesting to me. So I'm solving to go back to talking about what's interesting to me. And even if it's not like a particularly marketable choice. We'll see if it explodes the entire business for Antonia to talk about whatever is interesting to Antonia. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, instinctively, I think that when we play the music that our soul is compatible with, it attracts the crowd.
Yeah.
Because the real beauty is not the music being played, but it's the way the artists look when they're playing it.
Yeah.
And that's almost word for word what somebody said to us before. Like, it was like, you guys are artists, you should be making art. Right?
Yeah.
Going to marketable,
Yeah.
song list.
Well, I mean, I remember back in, I guess, 2017 when time is hard. 2000, when my daughter was 1 and I started listening to the podcast, so 9 years ago, I remember one of the majorly attractive things the podcast was every time Joel talked about being a male feeler. Like, because that was, I cannot tell you how many times, like, I grilled into my head, like, and this conversation happened with me and Ellen, like, as far as like our marriage, I was taught, like, men want to do things side by side. Women want to face each other and connect on a energetic level. And I remember thinking, like, I got it made in the shade. Like, that's all I like to do. Every woman's going to want to hang out with me. This is great. I'll have my pick of the litter. And then finally getting married and trying to have this like intense, energetic exchange with an INTP woman. She was like, what are you doing? I'll talk about interesting things, but I'm not going to, spiritually dissect myself with every conversation.
Yeah.
That blew my mind, but it was really helpful having Joel just explain the psyche of a male feeler.
That's good to know.
Yeah. I've thought often about doing a small group coaching experience. Maybe Jonathan, you and I run it together, talking about feeler male issues because you got extroverted feeling, I've got introverted feeling. I think there'd be a lot of that. And I also think that thinkermen would appreciate having, feeler men. Like there's a lot to learn, I think, from a thinker man side too, of like how to tune into some of those emotions that maybe feel a little bit more frightening, a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more quote unquote scary, or a little bit, oh man, how do I navigate that space? And sometimes it's just another man can be there. And I think that's helpful for men to have each other's back in that way. Personally, that's my experience.
Yeah. Well, every man has to experience feelings. It's just that some of us carry the torch into the dungeon and the rest of us follow.
Yeah. So maybe this year in 2024, it's been rattling on my head. So maybe we'll talk about it, Jonathan. But right now, we actually need to go to our clip for the week and tune into this idea of visionary, calibrator, implementer. I want to have you, as you watch this, think about how you identify. What's coming up for you as you watch myself and Antonia talk a little about this. We're going to come back in just a few minutes and we'll get some discussion for our Quest membership around this. We're going to go into some breakout rooms to talk about it. We have some journal prompts a little bit later and a Quest actual action step to give you this week to go test in your real life. Before we do that, let's watch this clip and we'll see everybody back here, including everybody on the live stream, right after this.
Today I want to talk a little bit about what would it look like if we started to attuning ourselves more toward the vision aspects of the world, not just the things that need to be fixed, calibrated, corrected for. But what if we started to attune to what's possible going forward? And I think that really, at least in our country here in America, I think that's been the American spirit for a long time.
Yeah.
What do you think, Antonia? I did a lot of talking there at the beginning. What say you?
Well, I'm glad you did. I think before we dive into this any further, we should probably explain what we mean by implementer, visionary, calibrator.
Sure.
Right. Just in case somebody hasn't been.
Would you say you're a calibrator, Antonia?
I would say I'm a calibrator.
Helping dial in the details, calibrating all the nuance.
We talked about this model in the talk you referenced your message, but we also have talked about it in a couple other podcasts. I think I think there's a podcast called Feels Like the First Time when I talked about like discovering my part in all of this. And I think we deep dive into this model a little further, maybe even better in that particular podcast. And then we did a 3-part series on how to become an influencer, which personally I think is massively underrated. I think that 3-part series is so freaking good. It's like a masterclass practically.
Oh, we might create our own competition. Don't tell people. They might go and I'm just kidding.
Don't go listen to it. It's too good. But we also reference this model there because the concept is that we have a preference for one of the 3 of these for implementation. And the point of origin, by the way, the reason why we don't have a good name for this model is it's sort of ours, right? We got
we invented it, so it sucks on naming. Right. That's what you're trying to say. Anything we invent, we don't know how to name, so we just call it, this is a whatever.
That's facts. So we
sort of invented it.
Well, I was going to say it comes from the point of origin is the book Traction by Gino Wickman.
Yeah.
And in that, Wickman talks about 2 different positions that heads of companies, successful companies, tend to take on. One of them is a visionary, as you've been talking about. And the other one, he calls it an integrator, somebody who takes the vision and makes it happen. And in Feels Like the First Time, I believe, that was me discussing the challenge I had in figuring out which one I am. Yeah. You are very clearly a visionary. Like that wasn't even a question, right? And we were discussing why it's so hard to integrate. And we also took the liberty of changing the word integrate into implement, because I think integrator is this concept of taking huge swaths of things and integrating them together to make them happen.
Yeah.
But implementer feels a little bit more like a preference, even if you are not integrating an entire company, right? If you're not creating some big, massive vision and rolling it out. Implementers, I think, a little closer to the core, which is a person whose instinct whenever they get onto something, they get excited about it, is to immediately begin acting on it and building and creating something from it.
Yeah. Well, I would just, as an example, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Mm-hmm. Steve Jobs was at Apple in the 1970s would be the visionary. Hey, this is what we can do with this technology. Kind of out there selling it, doing a lot of pitches. And then Steve Wozniak was the guy that had to actually build it.
Right.
Doing the actual coding, staying up late,
Right.
getting the team together, making it actually happen.
Yep. Exactly.
That's a good example.
That's a great example. So in that previous podcast where I was bemoaning the fact that I couldn't figure out which one I was because I didn't feel like either, that was when we added the third piece of Calibrator. And I think a calibrator is best seen as somebody who ensures that as the vision is being implemented, that they don't go off the rails. A calibration is ensuring that you're on the right path, ensuring that you're staying true to the original vision and not bringing in extraneous things or, muddying things up, but like kind of dialing it in really. And our observation has been that people have a strong preference for one of these, right? They instinctively see visions and ways that the future can roll out. They instinctively hear a vision and want to go start implementing on it, or they instinctively take what's being implemented and ensure that it's dialed in. And I'm a calibrator first, you're a visionary first. We don't have an implementer first. So that's one of the reasons why we have a tendency to hire implementers onto our team, people who get things done. We've also noticed, almost in the way of Enneagram instincts, that you have one that is a strong preference, a go-to, one that you can tap into, and then one it almost feels repressed, almost feels like something that one tends to ignore and avoid.
Yeah.
And for you, I would say that you're a visionary implementer and calibrator's last, whereas I'm a calibrator, visionary, and implementer is last. So I don't get that much done in comparison to implementers around us.
Yeah.
The reason why it's good to know all of that is as we talk, and you started this out by discussing how the world needs more vision. I 100% agree with that. The challenge is that when one is a visionary, because there is a segment of the population that represses the concept of vision, or really I would say doesn't have a lot of respect for it, doesn't see its purpose, doesn't really understand how that works. And so when people catch a vision, particularly if they're visionary blind or repressed, they have a tendency to, once they catch it, to think it came from within them. And so it's easy for people who have visions to be ignored or to it's almost like once it connects into another person, it's almost like that meme, that little cartoon where the person says, I made this, and hands it to another person. And then the next panel, that individual is holding the thing that was made in the second panel. And then in the third panel of the comic strip, it's like, I made this, right?
Yeah.
So it was given to them and they looked at it long enough to now identify with it and go, oh, this is mine.
Yeah.
So the challenge with being a visionary is that it's really easy for people to forget the source of the vision, particularly if it's not immediately implemented on. And so, like you said, why do we need these big visions? Why do we need to go to Mars or whatever is the big picture thing? That doesn't seem like that's important. I would say that the overwhelming majority of people who say that are probably visionary repressed.
Yeah.
Right. They don't understand the point of a vision. They don't get it. Right. They're probably oftentimes too calibrators. Implementers tend to respect visions a little bit more because implementers are looking for something to do. And when a vision is set and they can catch it, now they have a direction for where to go and how to take it, or a direction for their desire to implement. So I think implementers tend to respect visions more. Calibrators don't, especially if their vision lasts, right? If you're a calibrator, the instinct is to actually, and especially if you don't have any vision you're calibrating, if you can't catch a vision or you have trouble catching a vision and you're a calibrator, it means you're just looking for what's wrong in everything.
Yeah.
Right? You don't understand the point of something bigger. You're just trying to tear down everything that's like sort of smaller level. So I think it's good to diagnose oneself to go, which one do I have a tendency to go towards? Which one is the one that supports that? Which one is the one that I kind of push down the importance of? I mean, for me, realizing that I was implementer last explained a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the model in a nutshell, effectively.
Well, I think for you listening right now, because I'm like, okay, what does this matter to somebody's actual life? We're personality actor. How does this matter to me as an individual? If you're listening right now, that's what I would be asking if I was listening. Like, okay, thanks for sharing that. What do I do about it?
Right.
I think it's just something to be aware of, that if you're in a role that is more of a managerial role, you're probably being pushed toward calibration. This may be natural to you. And by the way, I'm not crapping on calibration. I think we need it in our world. Now, it may not be as fun to have somebody come and edit the paper, right?
Right. Everybody hates a good calibrator because calibrators like bring bad news.
Yeah, yeah, story editors, book editors, they're basically calibrators by trade, right? Even critics, like movie critics, they're calibrators. They're like, I like to replace the word critic with calibrator. I think that's it feels more positive because I'm not trying to criticize something. I'm trying to say what could have been better.
Yeah.
So I actually, in my own personal life, have already reframed criticism to calibration. And that's the word I now use in place of it. So that's one thing you could do if you have kind of an issue with this idea of calibration. That's one change I've made personally to make it more palatable, because sometimes it can be tough to hear what's wrong with something, especially if you're married to a TI user, introverted thinking user. That never happens, obviously. So the other thing too is we can work on exercising more of our implementation and more of our vision.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll never be world-class at it, but getting like the grammar around it, getting familiar with how these things are talked about. Like when you see somebody talking about a vision of something that seems kind of absurd to you, it's like, well, that's them probably doing what they're wired to do, just like I'm doing what I'm wired to do. It's, again, giving people grace, just like with personality type. We're saying, oh, that person is probably a visionary. They're looking toward the future. They're trying to build something to the future. Oh, they're seeing a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Maybe I could catch a little bit of that vision. Maybe I can get on board with that. Maybe I can be encouraging to it, not just poo-poo it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's too early to calibrate it. Maybe it's too early to talk about how we're going to actually do it. How we're going to implement this. And if somebody's an implementer and gets things done, it's hard to do things. It's hard to make stuff happen in the world. I mean, you know this, like if you're listening right now, you've tried to make anything big happen in the world, it's really tough. So sometimes calibrators come in and they want to calibrate too early.
Yeah.
And it can throttle the energy. So that's one thing that I could immediately see application for. So as you're listening right now, where would you put yourself on this little model? Visionary, implementer, calibrator. Visionaries see the bigger picture. They kind of have an entrepreneurial, like what's possible? What could we take from what we have and turn it into something more? What's possible? What can I see down the line? Implementers are the ones that get into the step-by-step. Okay, I got a 10-step plan. First, we're going to do this. Then we're going to do this. We're going to do this. And we go in this linear step-by-step plan. Or are you more of a calibrator? You see the plan, you see the thing that's been created. You're like, oh, we can make this better. We can tweak it. We can improve it. We can modify it. We can calibrate it to become better. How do you see your kind of energies showing up in those three categories?
Yeah. Calibrators also find the leverage points.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's easy to, we've got a lot of people working in our house right now on different projects just as a season.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see it's like the implementers, as soon as an idea comes up, they immediately grab their laptops and walk off and start doing it. Whereas I still sit there and I try to kind of tweak it and figure out what the leverage points are.
I'm grabbing whiteboards and like drawing like pictures of what's going on next. Like, okay, we're going to go here next.
And you can't think of anything tactically. You can only see like 6 months into the future. And it's like, that's a visionary, almost can't think of the now. Yeah. Whereas a calibrator is mostly thinking of the leverage points in the now. So it's like these are little ways to identify where you fit, and I think it's a really helpful model in just any stage of your life or any phase or anything that you're doing. It's good to know what's my go-to, especially if you're implementer last. It's like, why can't I get anything done? Or visionary last. Why do I think everybody's so stupid and all the things they want to do? Or calibrator last. Why do I always find myself going off the rails? Right. So I think that's a helpful piece as well.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Personality Quest. Joe Mark Witt here with Antonia Dodge from Personality Hacker, along with Jonathan Harden. Producing today is Karina Gunyon. I always mess up that word when I try to say it. I don't know why. When I say Karina, I try to say Kristen or Christy or something. I don't know why. Karina. Why is your name with a CH?
Why is your name Karina?
Yeah, no idea. It's your parents' fault, I think. Visionary, calibrator, implementer. That's coming up. As far as we're thinking about the new year, I mean, that's, I think, a good frame to think of it. As you're going into 2024 and you're thinking about how you're going to engage in the next year, how do you see this for yourself? Are you envisioning what's possible, all the visions for 2024? Are you thinking about what you can do, the plans to put in place? Like, I need to actually get to work. Here's the list of stuff, maybe you're more implementer energy. Or is it more about, oh, I need to fix this year. I need to correct this. I need to change the trajectory. This seems to feel like it needs a little bit of a tweak. Like, as a calibrator, Antonia, when you think about 2024, how do you envision the next year? Like, I would assume it's very depressing to think, oh, I got to fix all these things. I mean, I don't know. This is like lower down for me, right? This is not instinctual for me.
Yeah.
It feels demoralizing. It feels so awful.
Well, I would say that it's the most interesting when I think of all the things that can be tweaked and optimized. I think of it in terms of optimization, and it's always really interesting to me to think of all the little ways, like what are high leverage tweaks we could make? What are little things that we could change that'll have like a big impact?
Leverage points.
It's leverage points a lot of times.
So it is like forward looking. It's like forward looking and more of like finding a leverage point way.
But since I'm implementer last, I always get really overwhelmed with how to make it happen. Like I know all the little changes that have to happen. I'm just overwhelmed by like, well, what do I do to make those changes happen? That's where I get overwhelmed. Yeah.
How about you, Jonathan? Which one do you identify with the most out of that kind of that framework as you think about your coming year, like into the new year? How does that shape up for you?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely an implementer first, instinctual. So I'll take ideas, I mean, even ideas that you have mentioned in personality life path, or as I've listened to you throughout the podcast, I'll go put them into place. I was talking to Ellen and I realized our whole morning coffee ritual, we did not do that before I started listening to your podcast. But I remember one of you must have said something, and I went and bought a coffee pot that day. I bought 2 coffee cups. I bought beans, and I just studied all about coffee beans. And I said, we're going to drink coffee every morning, because what it did is for me is it slowed me down for about 30, 45 minutes before I went out and did my job.
Oh, wow.
And that was our immediate point of connection. And it like skyrocketed the benefits of me and Ellen's relationship, because it slowed me down, that was the problem. And so it was just, I feel like the coffee pot, I know y'all probably said something on the podcast, and I thought, oh, the coffee pot is a leverage point that can help me calibrate and tweak the day so I actually can implement better, because typically I implement, and I'm, beating my head up against a brick wall, and I'll beat it to a bloody mess. I mean, I will go and not stop until there's a calibration or a vision that's casted in front of me to help me change the path I'm on. And so I'm grateful for calibrators and visionaries in my life that can speak to me and say, hey, it would work a lot better if you did it this way, just try this.
I can imagine it's frustrating too with ENFJ preferences, feeling like an implementer. Sometimes we can conflate implementation with a lot of extroverted feeling or effectiveness kind of energy, like extroverted thinking or effectiveness kind of energy, where you're getting something done in the outer world and you're executing in the outer world. And as an ENFJ, my assumption is you don't really approach the world in the exact same way that maybe like a TJ would in the Myers-Briggs system, where they're like as an implementer that's not in a personality type that's a typical implementive personality type, like one that's normally bent on that. It's interesting you as an ENFJ identify with an implementer, and you do. I mean, we'll be on a call like this, and I'll say some idea, and you'll like, a few minutes, you'll email me like a little drawing or mock-up of the idea already expressed in like a tangible way. And I'm like, wow, Jonathan is so fast on how he can like take an idea and put some concrete to it. I don't know. Any comments to that specifically about being an ENFJ as an implementer? Is there anything you've called as wisdom or any maybe nuance there around that?
Yeah, I think, bringing type into it is interesting, because I still think it's extroverting the judging.
Yeah.
It's just that it's a different resource. Whereas, maybe extroverted thinking is looking at something different, but I'm looking at the space between us. So still a lot of my implementation is to benefit a relation between people or groups or organizations. A lot of the motivation is like, wait, if I wake up at 4:30 in the morning and get all this work done, it's going to make the team work with higher morale, for example.
Yeah.
So it might just be more of the motivation of what I'm paying attention to. But on the outside surface, it can still look like extroverted thinking until you put me in front of a calendar and I start scheduling things out. And I'm like, I can focus on one thing right now. Like there's no such thing with multitasking in me in calendars. It's like, put it right there. Okay. Next.
Slow and steady.
That's funny. Yeah, in the Quest call right now, in the chat, there was a question or like basically a positing is like, is there any relationship between these 3 components or these 3 positions we tend to take and type, right, or functions? And I've actually observed people of all different types in all different configurations. So if there is a pattern, I haven't sussed it out yet. I mean, but I can see major differences when I'm around somebody with my same type preferences that have a different stack on this one. Like if I'm around an implementer ENTP, I'm always like, how are you getting so much done? How have you figured so many things out? I have a lot of envy actually for that. But I think to your point, when you are an implementer and not so much a calibrator, the big challenge with that is you might be doing a lot of things, but are you doing the right things? And so it can get kind of frustrating if there's like no direction or no tweaking, or it's like, how do I keep missing that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
It feels like there's permission too right now. Like it feels like there's more permission to be a calibrator. Like I think we talked about this in the show than ever before. I mean, I think that like as an example, as a profession, this is just one example. Journalists, I believe, used to report the news. And now it feels like journalists, the role is to be a calibrator for the world and to correct things and to say how we should be thinking, or this is how it happened, this is how it should have happened from my viewpoint as the news organization I work for and myself. And it feels like that. And it goes across all spectrums. It's not just one topic or one political view or one social view or anything. I think all journalists are starting to lean into that more. And it's like the more opinion pieces and all these things. So I'm seeing that on the world stage. It's like, not only permission, but like that's the way we should all be held accountable and keeping track. And we're all like the little nosy neighbors with like binoculars looking out our window and like watching what all the neighbors do now. It's like that's the way it's ended up, I think, for a lot of people. But that's not natural for all of us. I don't think most people actually really enjoy that much.
I mean, if we said everything out loud that we say on the internet, our villages would be in chaos. I mean, we'd be burning and murdering each other. It would be madness. So
certainly.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So Karina, I think we're ready for breakout rooms for Quest members. I'd like to send our Quest members into small breakout rooms right now. If you're not part of our Quest call, if you're just watching the live stream, we're getting ready to go into breakout rooms. You should be part of this every week. It's really awesome because we go in and the community of like minds gets together in small groups of 3 or 4 people to talk a little about the clip we just watched, the short clip we just watched, unpack some of the ideas, lean in, open up the energies. Everyone gets a chance to share with each other. And then from those small groups, we'll come back into the main session here at Quest and be able to unpack some of the learning and then give a journal prompt and a Quest activity for the week to go test in our real life to apply our personality types in a real way, a real personal growth way, a real application way. Yeah.
Before we go into the breakout rooms, I do want to make just a little bit of a note because we are going to do some self-reflection around what you identify with. If you are very familiar with cognitive functions, it might be easy in this model to conflate certain functions with certain traits or characteristics. Like take, for example, we might unconsciously link visionary with, say, introverted intuition, which is a function that sees into the future and runs simulations into the future. So that feels very visionary. And in fact, there are many sources online that'll even call introverted intuition a visionary function or call it the visionary. And so we might have some, direct links there, pre-links, the same thing that when we talked about implementation and extroverted thinking. And you might even conflate calibration with, say, introverted thinking, or maybe even introverted sensing, right? Like you might conflate these ideas. But just to give an example, Joel is a visionary, but he's not using introverted intuition as his primary visionary piece. It's generally extroverted intuition. And what makes it even crazier,
a little introverted feeling
and some introverted feeling,
what it might feel like to be there.
Well, and I was going to say what's even crazier is that you are not like in the other models where it's like, what's your primary modality? Are you is it vision, right? Or like, are you a person who sees in your mind's eye? Are you auditory? Are you kinesthetic? And Joel is kinesthetic. So it is very fascinating to watch somebody use an emergent function, extroverted intuition, and only be able to truly know its manifest when he's moving through the world with it to hit visions, right? Like as in, I have seen you many times go, okay, so I don't exactly know what it looks like. I just know. And then he'll describe the feeling of what it would be. And he'll almost paint a scene of like, okay, so imagine we're both on stage, like a long time ago before we did live events. He's like, okay, imagine we're both on stage. And he'd almost like pick me up and stand me next to him as if we were physically already there experiencing this thing, which is very different than like, I think we should be doing, stage things. I think we should be doing this. It's like his visions took a very physical, kinesthetic, emergent property. And that was the first time I went, oh, you can be a visionary and not have introverted intuition. Like, in fact, I'm watching somebody do it in a very odd, unique style. So, so as you're self-diagnosing, try not to use traits one usually associates with specific functions, particularly when you're self-diagnosing, and take them on their own merit. What is a visionary? A visionary is somebody who moves towards something in the future that is not yet, or has a vision for something. A person asked, how could introverted sensing be a visionary? And I've seen people have a vision for a family using introverted sensing. The first thing that pops up for me is like in Encanto, the grandmother who was, I can't see her as anything other than an SJ type. The grandmother had a vision for the family, right?
Yeah.
And
vanguard.
And she was a vanguard, right? But it was a vision for the family. And so it's something that gets held. It's something that might even already be, and the vision is holding it into the future, right? So visionary is simply, it's something that lives outside of time and space. It's something that makes it about guarding a concept that that one believes is important to manifest. Whereas implementation is the how-to, whether you're using extroverted thinking or anything else, right? It's like, I'm busy, I'm in action, I'm doing this thing, I'm making it happen. And then calibration is coming in and just instinctively knowing when something's off, right? Just instinctively going like, I think if you really actually want to hit that target, I don't think you're going to do it this way. I think you're going to have to do it this way. And some people, they calibrate by getting feedback from others. This is how businesses have been doing it for ages, right? They call clients and they say, what was your experience? And then they collate all that information. And now they have calibration for how to make things happen. So it might be not just I know the calibration, but I'm getting everybody's feedback. And now I understand the direction to go. It's just a fascination with it.
Yeah. All right. Let's go into our breakout rooms and let's talk about this. Here's a prompt. Here's a prompt I'm going to give you to go into a breakout room. If you're not part of Quest membership, you can put it in the chat. We're going to be ending the stream here soon. So you'd be part of this each week, personalityhacker.com/quest, if you'd like to join that. The first breakout room prompt. Here we go. Which do you resonate with out of this short little model here? Visionary, calibrator, or implementer? Do you see yourself more as a visionary? Again, visionary doesn't have to literally be the visions of the future. You could feel them. You could hear them in your mind's ear. Like, you don't have to just see them. So visionary, but looking forward. Is that what you identify with? What about a calibrator? Are you the person that helps, when the plane's in the air, you're either using the trim or the boat's moving, you're just kind of keeping it right on course, just trimming that a little bit here and there. Or are you more the implementer, making the step-by-step plan, getting into action, generating energy, moving toward, building the goal, making the things happen that someone else maybe cast a vision for? Which one is the primary energy that you identify with in your life? And which is the one that you really have a harder time with? Like, which one's the stretch for you? Which one's the challenge for you? So if, like, for example, for me as the visionary, I can kind of see where I want to go and some of the intention, where we want to feel. But man, calibration, I don't even see the value in it half the time, let alone want to do it or be good at it. I'm like, you're slowing things down, Antonia. Stop, correct. We're not even there yet. You're killing the idea before it's been born, like whatever it might be, right? Or even if the middle, like, yes, I know it's not perfect yet, but don't calibrate it. Like, it can be difficult, and I can be dismissive around it, even though it's so needed in our world. I just don't see the value often. So that's a stretch for me. So as you tune into this in your breakout rooms, we're going to put 12 minutes on the clock, 12 minutes on the clock. And which one do you resonate with? Visionary, calibrator, or implementer? And which one do you find stretching? And do you have anybody else in your life that either matches what you do, or maybe they complement some of your maybe harder, challenging, or weaknesses around this? For example, I married a calibrator. I think a world-class calibrator, which is a good choice on my part. I think that was a win for me. Let's go into our breakout rooms. We'll see you back here in 12 minutes. And we will see you very, very soon, right after this. If you're still here, staying with us on the live stream for just a few more minutes, we are going to be ending the live stream to go in with our Quest members to actually go ahead and address some of the things that come up for them in the breakout rooms. And then we're going to be doing some journal prompting to tune this into ourselves and our own hero's journey, and looking for an outer action to take this week. Something simple that we can do in our lives in about a week, just to go and see how these energies show up for us in life, just to tune to them and see if we can find application for the very thing that is our personality type. As we know ourselves and understand ourselves more, how can I use this? How can we start to connect this in a real way? We love for you to be part of this membership each week. Right now, we're doing live calls on a weekly basis on Sundays, the time of this live call and recording. But in the future, we're also going to be adding to our membership catalog. We're going to be doing the things that aren't full programs. Like often here at Personality, we create entire programs thematic, but there's some things we want to teach and talk about that we're like, where do we put this? Well, a membership program is the perfect place to do monthly calls, deep dive calls, where we can go deeper into certain topics and certain issues and some of the things that we want to deliver on a personal growth path for people in their hero's journey of their life that we don't always have space for in general programs. This is a great place to put.
Yeah. So personality type is it's a very clearly a powerful model. It's why there are so many millions of people who are obsessed with it. And I suspect it's because we instinctively feel its power. We know that this is a very powerful tool. But I've started to see when we as communities end up doing more talking about type than we are implementing type, when we are making it come alive in our lives. The vision or like the picture I get in my head is of Excalibur in stone, like the sword in the stone, throbbing with energy and just walking around it and walking around it and walking around it, like being completely hypnotized by its power and energy, but never attempting to actually unsheath it, never attempting to pull it from the stone and use it. And maybe it's because we don't know how, maybe it's because we're a little afraid of what it would mean. But
well, swords cut, don't they?
That's right. Exactly.
They're decisive.
They are decisive. That's right. And incisive. And so the purpose of Quest, and really the purpose of all of the programs we create, is what happens when you pull the sword from the stone. What happens when you start implementing the power of the system as opposed to just studying it. And so Quest is a way to help make personality type and the power of it, the actual authentic, not just its power to hypnotize us, not just its power to attract us, but but harnessing it and using it in our lives, its power to make us not just knowledgeable people, but wise people. Right. If we implement these systems in our lives, it's the path of authentic wisdom. And so that's the purpose of the Quest, is to have a way to keep that plate spinning every single week. Look for ways where we don't just talk about type, but we implement it in our lives and have its power work for us, as opposed to just being obsessed with it or being hypnotized by it, because in some ways we're serving it at that point. How do we make type serve us? Yeah.
Last week on the show on Quest, we talked about one-sidedness, and we showed a clip by Dr. Dario Nardi, who had given a talk on the main stage at our Profiler training event just a few weeks ago. And we featured a section of that clip. So myself, Antonia, and Dario were on the stage taking questions from the audience, and he was delivering some communication around this idea of one-sidedness and giving some hope that people that are later in life, maybe even in elderhood, if they feel like they're one-sided or calcified, it's okay, because there's always opportunity for people to expand, grow, and step more into themselves. And we think that personality type gives us a great tool to see avenues for actually addressing the problems in our life. One of the challenges that sometimes people go is like, oh, wow, what a great diagnostic tool, this personality type. Now I can understand my problems so well. Look at how amazing I can understand my problems, and I can diagnose my problems. I can understand my problems. I can look at the people in my life and help them diagnose and understand their problems. We can talk about all those diagnoses. We can get really clear labels and unpack it and get more detailed. And I can spread the word, and then we can have conversations about it. Maybe we could get conferences going, and we could go and meet together and talk about our problems and our challenges. And that can be very valuable to do a lot of diagnosis. I mean, I think that is, you have to have a good diagnosis to get to a good prescription. But I think what happens also in some of these models, some of these personal growth models, is it can be a little bit of a frightening move to start taking real action in our real lives and implementing things that we have to make real world changes. And so we like staying in the diagnostic realm, because as long as I can keep diagnosing, and every time I get to a place where I'm ready to take action and I'm a little nervous, well, if I could just go laterally and find more diagnosis, maybe I could find more description. Maybe that's not the right action. Maybe I need more information or more nuance first.
Right.
And so we go down and more, and then we can get distracted maybe with arguments or philosophizing about theories, or, oh, you know what? We need to create a better model to test Myers-Briggs. That's what we need to do, or personality type. Let's go build a new test or assessment, or the 16 types is just too little. Let's add in subtypes, or let's add in extra stuff. Like, we like to talk about those things too. But these can all be bypasses. It's really very simple. When we understand our personalities, we understand how we learn information, we understand how we make decisions, and we understand some of the leverage points of how to grow our awareness in the perception of the world, and we can learn how to make better decisions, and we can learn to mitigate some of the challenges that we have. And so our challenge to you, if you're watching this, is don't just understand your problems using the lens of personality types. Actually go to work solving them. Actually go to work changing your life in a real, visceral way. We've worked with clients, and we've coached hundreds and thousands of people, both online and in person, how to do this with their personality type, tuning into who they are as the basis, as a substrate of understanding the self to say, okay, I'm wired this way. How do I ergonomically make my life match who I am? And it doesn't mean the whole world organizes around all my preferences. It means I use all of the external world as markers, not just to understand the problems I have with it, but to go, you know what? True learning equals behavior change in the outer world. So if I learn something and I change something about myself, if I really genuinely learn about my personality and I start to lean into it, lean forward with it, make it real, well, real changes are going to happen in my outer life and my relationships. And not always positive sometimes. Sometimes they're challenging changes, right? Sometimes when you've been on a wrong trajectory, talk about calibration, and you have to calibrate, how much you have to calibrate can be painful, right? Especially if you've been off on the wrong trail for a while. So it's not always good news, but I think the way out is through it. I think we've seen clients, even in the midst of their struggle of like, man, this is hard. It was hard for me when I grew myself using my personality. I think Antonia also had a lot of, both of us kind of had to reset our lives in a pretty significant way, like over a decade ago, when we decided to really get serious about growth. So I think it's an opportunity for you to be able to, you can address small problems at first, but I think there's this opportunity to keep going down the road. And that's what we want to do on these quest calls. It's a hero's journey of our lives. We want to meet you in your life, on the street of your life, where you are. I want to connect with you with a bunch of people that are like-minded, have shared values and interests about not just understanding our problems, but actually solving problems in our lives. Dialing that in, living a lifestyle that is engaged. It's an enthusiasm of being. We want you to be part of this every week, because I think this is something that can move the needle for all of us.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, I think that's probably why what you're talking about is why we tend to attract people who are in transition.
Yeah.
People in transit, whether it's a career transition or maybe a relationship transition or a paradigm, religious transition, we tend to attract people who are already in the thick of it. Like they can't continue to live their lives as they were before. It's just become too painful. And so they go, well, my previous life was not designed with a deep insight and knowledge about myself. But now that I have that deep insight and knowledge, now I have growing insight and knowledge, I want to make sure that the next one I set up, that one is going to take all of that into account.
Yeah.
And so you can't always push people to make transitions in their lives that are good for them. But if you're already in the middle of one, that's when you start looking for resources like crazy. How do I make this transition? Like, how do I never do that again? How do I make sure that my life is never what I don't want it to be again? How do I make sure that I set it up right? So we have a tendency to attract people who are already in the thick of it. But I think that if a person really takes the information and the models seriously, then that I think that's one of the reasons why I have a tendency to stay hypnotized and never grab the sword, because we know once I do, I'm going to be fully in the middle of transition, and I'm not going to be able to, I won't be able to unsee it. I won't be able to unsee all the changes that need to be made. And sometimes they're big and painful. And sometimes, it's like, do I want to enter a situation where the phrase, the way out is through, now applies to my entire life? And the answer is, well, it depends on the individual, of course, and how much pain you can tolerate with your current circumstances. But when you get to the other side, it's it is astonishing how much these models help guide the path, how much they're like a rope in dark places that allow you to get to the other side. So yeah.
So we have to end this live stream in just a moment. Before we do, talking about visionary, implementer, calibrator, in the comments, the YouTube comments on the live stream, and or below this video if you're watching later, just put in there what you think your order is. Like if you had to go like 1, 2, 3, like visionary, implementer, calibrator, and almost like a stack or a preference or an order of sorts, what would you say yours is? How would you identify that? And are there any, maybe some extra qualitative comment you could make under it? Like, and I also have discovered, or I've learned this, I'd love to hear the learnings or the discoveries in your life as you tune into these energies. So in the comments on the live stream and or below on YouTube, Twitter, wherever you're watching this live stream, just put in the comments what it is for you, visionary, implementer, calibrator, and the order. I'd love to see some of those comments.
And how it impacts your life. So knowing that I'm a calibrator, visionary, implementer, it's helped me understand why it's very difficult for me to get things done, make things happen. Whenever I have to do something, I always sit down and I like spend a couple moments sort of confused about how I'm going to make this thing happen. But knowing that doesn't let me off the hook. It doesn't mean I don't have to implement. It just helps me understand why it's hard. And then it encourages me to get more tools and to have more people in my life that will help me with that.
Yeah.
As a visionary, implementer, calibrator, how has that changed your life? What changes have you made or based on those insights?
Well, I definitely have given more space for calibration. I don't dismiss it. And I know how to ask for it in a better way. So I'm like, hey, thanks for offering calibration right now. I feel like my idea is too fragile. Can we talk about it after I get a little bit more implementation in? Like as we get the more teeth on it, let me get the document together. Let me get the plan together. Then please give me the feedback. But before we do that, it's so fragile right now. So I know how to manage that better.
Right. And as opposed to pushing it off and thinking it's dumb and
Or
never
dismissing it.
integrating or dismissing it.
Yeah.
It's knowing when to invite it into the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's made it a better conversation between the two of us. But
Yeah.
I think it's also helped us with calibration. One of the things we need to do is be more simple.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I think you really understood the importance of implementing a more simple system
Oh,
going
yeah.
forward. So,
Definitely.
all right.
All right. We just got a note from Karina, our producer, that we got to go back over to join with the Quest members. They're coming back from the breakout rooms. You should join Quest each week. Personalhacker.com/Quest. We'll see you in the membership if you decide to join. And we're going to also be releasing some more content in the catalog as well, not just these live calls. There's also going to be a content in 2024 this year. All right. Peace. Talk very soon. Happy New Year. Hopefully
New Year.
you're doing good. We'll see you next week, which is also next year on, I think it's January 7th, right? 11:45 a.m. Eastern time.